You know, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I've always liked Quickybaby. He really is just such a genuinely nice guy. There's nothing fake about him. What you see is what you get. The person that you see on Twitch is 100% the person that you meet if you're lucky enough to meet him in real life. And while I've always liked him, I never really loved him until this weekend at Tankfest, when Quickybaby gave away 10,000 rental codes for TOG2s, and for about an hour or two, every Tier 6 battle was 30 TOGs versus 30 TOGs. Quickybaby, you're a beautiful creature. And if things don't work out with Tanya, I just want you to know I am prepared to have your babies. Because you are the man who made this happen. This isn't the match that Quickybaby was in, but this was just what World of Tanks matchmaking was like around Tier 6, when he gave away his 10,000 activation TOG2 rental bonus code during his live stream from Tankfest. TOGs! Beautiful TOGs as far as the eye can see, in every direction, this side of the map and the other side of the map. Have you ever seen anything as beautiful as this? Which team are going to win this Clash of the Titans? The correct answer, of course, is who cares? TOG always wins, and that has never been more true than it is today. However, there are certain behaviour patterns that, when used, will make TOGs more or less effective, depending upon the behaviours adopted. You see, TOG is, first and foremost, a herd animal. TOGs do tend to learn from quite an early age that there is safety in numbers. But there's always going to be the occasional TOG who's something of a hipster, is too cool to go with the crowd. Perhaps he was mistreated early in life when he was a young Bren gun carrier. And while it is unusual for a solitary hipster TOG to actually reach the age of maturity, they often fall prey to ravenous packs of tigers and panthers working the fringes of the TOG herd. But it's not altogether impossible. The occasional hipster TOG does exist. And they are relatively easy to identify, not just because of their solitary self-imposed lifestyle, but because isolating themselves from the herd means that they've been excluded from communal grooming activities, which means not only do they have no friends, but they also stink of piss, which makes them a lot easier for the panthers and tigers to track them down out in the wild. This herd of TOGs, attacking the middle from the southern end of the map, displays a fairly typical level of TOG social cohesion, with the alpha TOG at the front of the pack and the betas forming an orderly procession behind him. This is a fairly typical herd of TOGs, well disciplined, with only one alpha TOG. By contrast, the herd of TOGs attacking from the north display the typical properties of a herd with too many alphas vying for dominance, which means that the betas don't really know which alpha TOG to follow, and so the herd fractures, splits up, loses its cohesion, and effectively splits into smaller herds, making themselves easier prey for the larger and more disciplined herd approaching from the south. You see, because TOGs are not by nature confrontational creatures, this kind of situation can arise when multiple TOGs within the same herd reach maturity and begin competing for mates. The dominant TOG that we see leading this procession down the trenches in the middle of the map has only just reached maturity, as can be seen by the yellow-coloured breeding plumage that is beginning to show through. As he gains maturity, the bright yellows will give way to a more sober mix of greens and browns. You'll observe that the two juveniles accompanying the dominant bull TOG here have not yet begun to display their breeding plumage, and in the normal course of events in a herd of TOGs, only one male would be in breeding season at any given time. But what's happened here is that multiple males have all reached breeding status at the same time, and because TOGs are not by nature confrontational creatures, rather than compete amongst themselves for the available breeding females, they've simply all chosen to go their own ways, splitting the herd into smaller and smaller groups. Now, this is not an entirely negative behaviour pattern. The process of the herd fracturing and splintering into various different breeding groups and spreading out across the map can relieve population pressure, but only on a map where there's no competition or natural predators. On a map where there is a competing herd, it tends to be the case that the herd that sticks together with only the one dominant breeding male tends to succeed. This herd of TOGs is displaying some fairly typical behaviour of a well-disciplined herd when they sense that there is competition nearby. The alpha male, clearly a mature specimen as can be seen by the more sober shaded browns of his breeding camouflage, has positioned himself at the centre of the herd from where he can more easily observe and direct the actions of his juveniles. The juveniles are entirely happy to follow his direction and have positioned themselves protectively around the alpha male. The juveniles in a well-ordered herd of TOGs tend to adopt these kind of behaviour patterns for multiple practical, if instinctive, reasons. First and foremost, a bull TOG in breeding season at the centre of a herd of juveniles is more likely to survive until he can successfully find and mate with a cow TOG. This is obviously good for the continuation of the herd as a whole, but also the juveniles who associate most closely with the dominant bull TOG tend to receive better scraps at the feeding table. So it's a mutually beneficial but instinctive herd behaviour pattern. And straight away we can see the immediate practical benefits of a well-ordered and well-disciplined herd of TOGs with only one alpha bull male compared to this second herd of TOGs that's fractured into a bunch of smaller sub-herds with multiple mature males, which does have the benefit of allowing the herd as a whole to cover greater ground in its search for breeding partners, but as can be seen quite clearly, when the situation devolves into one of competition, whether that be with a rival herd of TOGs or just with natural predators, the bigger herd tends to be the one that comes out on top. This of course is why TOG platoons are so much more successful than hipster TOGs who like to go it alone. Here we see the younger of the dominant alpha males from the northern herd undergoing a bit of a crisis of confidence. He's obviously quite young for a mature male, and this is very likely the first time he's had to lead his own herd. Now the herd didn't start off particularly large with only 3 members, and one of the juveniles has already died, and he appears to be suffering from a severe lack of self-confidence. He's actually letting the surviving juvenile take the lead for him. Now again, sometimes this can actually be a beneficial behaviour. Sometimes when the dominant male realises that he's reaching the end of his breeding season, they'll pick a favoured juvenile and kind of give them a go at the reins in order to help them to reach maturity a little faster. But I don't think that's what's actually happening here. I think that the dominant male with the early display of breeding camouflage there simply doesn't really know what to do. By contrast, we can see a quite clear leadership style in the dominant alpha TOG in the larger and more well-disciplined herd. He initially allowed the juveniles to fan out and protect him, but you can see that instantly one of the juveniles was killed, the rest started to become a little anxious and unsure, and the alpha TOG instantly stepped forward and began to lead by example. You can see that some of the juveniles at the rear of the herd there were a little unsure of what to do. Their initial enthusiasm dampened a little by the loss of one of the herd, but the clear and decisive example given by the bull TOG leading the herd here has stiffened their resolve, and they're once again anxious to get forward and show him what they're made of. Admittedly, the old bull has taken a few wounds there, but his example has shown the juveniles what they can achieve if they stick together as one herd. And so with their confidence restored by the old bull's sterling example, the juveniles rush forward not only to protect their leader, but also to show him exactly what they're made of. Sadly, magnificent though these tanks are, the harsh realities of the natural world means that only one of these 2 herds of TOGs is going to have a happy ending. The less mature of the dominant males from the northern herd, despite being within sight of the breeding circle, appears to instinctively understand that his days are numbered. And as is often the case, when one herd of TOGs is about to be overrun by another, the dominant male sacrifices themselves in order to ensure that as many of the juveniles as possible escape to perhaps form another herd in a less hostile map. Unfortunately, and sadly, the noble sacrifice of this young alpha male appears to have been almost completely in vain, as the juvenile behind him, possibly afraid of going it alone, possibly out of a sense of loyalty to his very short-lived leading alpha male, or possibly confused by the pheromones given off in such close proximity to the breeding circle there, but either way, the sacrifice was in vain. This herd has been wiped out in its entirety. Which means that the better led and more disciplined herd from the south is free to spread out across a new map in search of breeding partners. The producers of this nature documentary would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude towards Mr. Will Quickybaby Frampton of Twitch TV, without whose generous donation of 10,000 rental TOG2 codes for World of Tanks, today's documentary would not have been possible. That's it for today. Hope you enjoyed it, and as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.